Spider movies freak me out more than any subgenre of horror. With the release of 2 spider horror movies coming out this month in April of 2024, I thought it was high time for me to revisit some of my childhood faves, or I guess my childhood traumas, and also get to some really iconic spider movies in order to really understand like this full timeline, this arc of how spider movies have evolved within American cinema. So let's get into them, starting with one of the first spider movies, Tarantula, which came out in 1955. Tarantula is about a scientist who is trying to make this new scientific medical advancement that will allow food to become much larger. But when it's in its like kind of pre-development state, it is used in poor ways, which again, you get gigantic creatures. It is really just a part of that larger like Cold War, atomic age, sci-fi genre of B movies that are coming out and really hitting on a lot of the anxieties in this time period that many Americans had of, all of this medical scientific advancement happening so quickly in their lifetimes, in World War II, into the Cold War, and just really fearing what could go wrong at such a high rate of development and change. This film was definitely piggybacking off the success of Them, which I believe released a year prior. And there is this whole genre of sci-fi films coming out in the 50s that are hitting on this soft spot. And they're just like churning these out. So it's not like Tarantula was anything like, cataclysmic and different. But I think personally, we should give this movie a bit of credit because it did contribute a lot to how, movies evolve and change in terms of their like special effects. I think there's a big precedent being set in these atomic era sci-fi horror movies where you do see time and time again that one female scientist being dropped into this boys club. And in Tarantula, it was very clear that she was being defined by her gender. She was not there to really save the day. She was really there just to be, I guess, a pretty face to like market to this male audience. She was like having a coyly pivot in professional settings against like flirtation, all of which we would be defining as sexual harassment today. Let's fast forward about 20 years to Kingdom of Spiders, which came out in 1977. In Kingdom of Spiders, we have a small town, and the last thing they need is a standoff with Mother Nature in the form of spiders, because the economic conditions are so dire in this community. It is very much, in my mind, a Jaws ripoff. You just take away the shark and you add in spiders. And they're not gigantic in this one. They are true to size. But that definitely doesn't make them any less scary for me. It's so real. And they did use real tarantulas in the making of this movie, which, opens up a whole slew of questions for me. How do you direct a spider? This movie signals a distinctive transition of the spider movie being used as a way to talk about Cold War fears to a little bit more of like the environmental eco traumas and anxieties of the time period in the wake of like the beginning of an environmental movement in the United States. I personally didn't find William Shatner's player personality in this movie to be all that engaging in terms of connecting with his character. I found it a little annoying, especially when you have, again, what do you know, that one female scientist coming in. Although in this movie, she does play a far more active role, and we do get to know her character a little bit more. She's still having to deal with these like sexual and romantic advancements of the main character who is male. Is it a way to like expand and impress upon the masculinity of our male character who's like here to save the day? And just like in Tarantula, in Kingdom of Spiders, that female scientist by the end of the movie has given in to the romantic pursuit of our main character. And I really feel like the message of this movie when it comes to gender is really clear. You have women working in unprecedented levels than ever before in the 70s, and the goal here is to tame them, right? By the end of this movie, you have her giving in to all of these like romantic and sexual advancements by our male main character, played by William Shatner. So maybe you can't tame nature, but you definitely can tame women. That's what I took away from this movie. Let's skip ahead another 2 decades to Arachnophobia, which released in 1990. Headstrong on making new advancements in science, a team of spider scientists unwittingly bring back a rare species that quickly takes over a small American town. This movie was the very first spider movie I ever watched, and boy, has that lamp scene lived rent-free in my head ever since. It has a lot of really big names in this movie. I feel like it's one of those like really mainstream spider movies. And I believe one of the people who directed this movie is like a part of, or at least at one time was associated with Steven Spielberg's filmmaking company. So it's not here to be campy. I think it's really here to be a thriller movie for the entire family. Even though this was a rewatch for me, I have not seen it in a very long time, probably not once since I've been an adult, and it is incredibly suspenseful. Like, it still has me in its clutches. I'm not kidding, this movie is scary. And then they also like fake you out too. There's like scenes where it's like, will they, won't they? And sometimes they attack and sometimes they don't. So if you don't have a memory of what actually went down the first time you watched it, or it's your first time, you're very much at the whim of all of those. I know there's a whole lot of academic study being done analyzing horror movies from a class or like a socioeconomic lens, and I would be really curious to know what people have to say about this one. Because to me, the themes of urban versus rural really show up in this movie from the very beginning. It's releasing in 1990, we have the Reagan era coming to an end, but still in many ways continuing with his VP coming into office. There's this thread of fear being woven throughout the movie that has nothing to do with spiders, but this fear of like an urban city slicker takeover. And if you're looking at things through a class lens for this movie, what will save the day is really the big question here. City slicker smarts or rural sensibilities. Spiders function as like this placeholder for anything that we fear at any given time. For me, this movie is a cinematic masterpiece. No matter what age or point in time in my life that I watch this movie, it will still be one of the most effectively scary movies that I will ever watch. Whew, okay, let's loosen up the mood here and talk about a horror comedy, Eight-Legged Freaks, which came out in 2002. As a teen, I was so obsessed with Riley Smith, who has a very minor role in this movie, but I knew he was in it. And back in the day when Netflix was actually sending you physical media into your mailbox, I remember repeatedly getting this movie, watching it, and then at night having nightmares that there were spiders all on my pillow. But it was worth it though for my teenage self. The early 20s, wait, what am I saying? The early 2000s and the 2010s even brought a slew of loosey-goosey, silly spider movies where we do see us going back to like the atomic age era of spiders being super gigantic and large. And when we zoom out to look at horror movies in general at this time, things are getting very meta with like Scream, for example, really calling out any kind of like tropiness that's going on within the genre, making fun of it, trying to create something wholly fresh and new. And Eight-Legged Freaks is that spider animal attack movie that's trying to be meta and a little bit spoofy of the genre as a whole. This movie is a whole lot of camp, and it is funny, it is silly. I think everybody in the movie really knows what movie they're in. You have David Arquette giving the performance of a lifetime, I'm kidding, but you see so much of what we've discussed here. You have this politically divided town, check. We have a rural setting, small town, check. Scientist that is doing some really dicey things, check. But some really fun, different things that you see in this movie is that our main character here is a woman. She has quite a bit of power being the sheriff in this town. All the other people in this community that really have power, like the mayor, for example, they're kind of clueless, they're silly. And although she is kind of debating this romantic tryst with a character in this movie, at the end of the day, it just only goes so far in challenging norms within the animal attack genre. Let's discuss a Stephen King adaptation, The Mist, which came out in 2007. In The Mist, we follow one man stranded at a grocery store, tasked to defend himself against this weird mist that has come out of nowhere and descended upon his small town. This movie seeks to highlight the monstrosity in us all. Move over spiders, humans are your worst threat in this film. This is a very apocalyptic movie. The concepts of fear, group psychology, religion, they are huge components for this film. I found this one to be very entertaining. I didn't know what was gonna happen next. Truly, anything could happen, and there's more than just spiders in this movie. They play a big role though. Half the fun was trying to figure out, as the viewer, why the mist had descended upon the town. It would be a huge spoiler for me to reveal why the mist actually appears and descends upon this town, because there is a specific reason. It's not ambiguous at all. When I think back to all the other spider movies I've seen recently, I don't think the reason why the mist arrives to this town is the most creative, but it says quite a bit about the time period of the early 2000s. And then you'll get to the ending of this movie and then you'll lose all hope for humanity. It's ruthless, it's cruel. Like, this movie's ending has to be in one of the top 10 endings for movies ever. And apparently it diverges very differently than Stephen King's version in the novella that he wrote titled The Mist, which I've never read, but I did see online that he reportedly said he liked the movie's ending better than his own. So that says quite a lot. Looking ahead on our timeline of creepy crawly cinema, we have Sting that is releasing in theaters. I've heard quite a bit of mixed reviews on this one. From what I've gathered from people who've seen it, it is the perfect campy pairing for fans of eight-legged freaks, so I might like this one. And reviews for Infested, which will be streaming on Shudder, and it's also French, the reviews for this one are a little bit more positive. People have described Infested as being really suspenseful and that it's doing something very unique for the spider monster movie genre. And what I find deeply fascinating about spider horror movies, besides the fact that I continue to watch them, is that they speak a lot to the time and the place, the context of a country. Humans are always put in their place by Mother Nature, no matter how hard they try to control it. And we see spiders as a part of like this animal attack genre, typically in response to people trying to exploit nature for either economic purposes, political purposes, like you name it. And then sometimes movies with spiders are just plain good fun. And now for my favorite part, what are your favorite movies and books that feature spiders? Leave them down below, along with any other thoughts or comments you have about the movies that I featured for this video. I really can't wait to hear your thoughts. I hope you've been enjoying learning a little bit more about like environmental and eco horror this spring with all of my content I've been throwing at you all. I will see you all in my next video. Bye!